is there a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about indeed regarding this game. My prediction was, 59-24 was my prediction. And oh, how wrong I could have been. Outside of the fact that I picked the correct team to win the game, everything else was different. Michigan 34, Maryland 27. This game was close. This game was a game that could have went either way. At the end of the day, it was because Maryland made A, 2 more turnovers, and B, Michigan was just the more talented team, had home field advantage. It was a bunch of little things outside of the turnovers, which are big things, that added up over time and eventually allowed Michigan to take a 34-19 lead with 3 minutes and 31 seconds left that effectively iced the game, because Maryland scoring a touchdown with 45 seconds left and needing an onside kick recovery to tie the game is almost unrealistic. So yeah, number 4 Michigan, 4-0, 1-0 in conference, defeated the now 3-1, 0-1 in conference Maryland Terrapins. What a fight by Maryland. And Michigan, right from the get-go, looked like they possibly could have opened up the wound and exposed it to the world, because the opening kickoff, Maryland muffed it. And then in one play, 10 yards, Luke Schoonmaker, pass from J.J. McCarthy for a touchdown for Michigan to take a 7-0 lead. Maryland marches down and scores a field goal. Michigan then marches down and answers with a field goal. And then Maryland answers with a touchdown. And then this is where things get interesting. It's 10-10, end of the first quarter, which is already unexpected. Maryland takes the lead early in the second. And then Michigan's offense, from their last score, which was 8-10 in the first quarter, they don't score again until 22 seconds left in the second quarter, and that was on 4th and 1 when Blake Corum ran. His offensive line and tight ends perfectly blocked for him, and he ran for a 33-yard score with 22 seconds remaining. 17-13 at the half. Very few people expected Michigan to be in this position. The line closed at Michigan minus 17. The over-under was 66. It was 66. At the end of the day, there were 61 points scored. I certainly thought that this game was going to be a game where the over would be hit. But no, I was wrong. 34-27. Michigan did not look like, the top tier football team that I thought they exactly were, but they beat a team who I think was top 25 caliber in the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland played better than I thought they would. Michigan played worse than I thought they would. And that's why at the end of the day, Michigan only beat them by 7 instead of beating them by multiple touchdowns like I predicted. So Maryland have to work on turnovers. Their penalty problem, Maryland did not have a single penalty until the end of the fourth quarter, which was a false start, as compared to the ungodly amount of penalties they had against SMU. So Maryland might have played their best brand of football in the year. Very impressive for Mike Locksley and company. Michigan, their defense was out of whack. Really, the whole team was out of whack in the first half and at parts during the third quarter. The offense really showed itself in the fourth quarter. The defense showed itself after halftime. Roman Hemby and Maryland's run game, the run game did have somewhat of a factor. They ran for 128 yards, 3.8 yards per carry. But Roman Hemby, Maryland really never had not even a single long TD run that I thought they might have had. Michigan, on the other hand, Blake Corum had 2 of them, a 47-yarder and a 33-yarder. So Michigan's rushing attack was more of a factor in this game. Blake Corum had 30 carries for 243 yards and 2 touchdowns. J.J. McCarthy missed some deep balls. Michigan's pass game wasn't as much of an impact as I thought it would be. Maryland had 269 passing yards. Overall, it was Michigan's run game and just their superior defense that won them this game. Honestly, Michigan's defense stepping up in the second half, but a lot to learn from Michigan's offense and I would say a bright future for the Maryland Terrapins. Maryland's schedule, and we'll talk about this in the ramifications part more, but this is a team that, with how they've been playing, if they continue to play this way and continue to improve, they could get 8-9 regular season wins with only 2 or 3 more losses, which would be to Penn State, Wisconsin, which I think at this point is a 50-50 game. I think Maryland is better than Wisconsin. Penn State and Ohio State are certainly going to be challenges, are going to be big challenges to climb. Maryland gets Ohio State at home, but they have to travel to Beaver Stadium. So excited to see how Maryland's season turns out, if they are as good as I think they are, which I think they're of top 25 caliber. Michigan, as a Michigan fan, I wish my team would have won by more. I wish J.J. McCarthy would have connected on more of those deep throws. He hit one to Ronnie Bell, made some nice throws on some sprint outs, to Luke Schoonmaker, and I think another to Roman Wilson. So his talent's there. He's doing better than Cade would have done in his position. The offense is better with him there, but, I'd like to see more efficiency. And I'd love to see Donovan Edwards healthy too, because we could have used him in some situations where Blake Corum needed to rest. That's basically how the game went. Michigan was out of rhythm for most of the game. And I mean, seriously, they were out of rhythm. Michigan, who was around a top 10 offense by efficiency and a team that scored, north of 50 points per game, when they face a defense that isn't top 25 in efficiency and a defense that, just under Maryland's defense have always been their Achilles heel in the Mike Locksley era. When you face a defense like that and you don't score from 8-10 in the first quarter to 22 seconds in the second quarter, there is something out of whack, especially when you have a big talent advantage and when your first touchdown came off of a turnover which put you 10 yards from the end zone. Michigan's offense was out of whack. Call it what it is. And the defense was at times too, letting Maryland take the lead 13-10 in the second quarter with a chance to have Maryland lead at the half. Thankfully, Michigan's offense, more specifically to give credit, Blake Corum, who carried Michigan's offense for most of the day, he did not allow that. Maryland, I know that, me saying they're a great team when they're disciplined, that might sound funny when they muff the opening kickoff, but they only had one penalty. And one of the interceptions was a tip where R.J. Moten tipped it to himself. And Michigan's defense, watching, the game that I watched showed me that Michigan's defense is better than most anticipated it would be from losing 9 starters. They had 3 sacks, 5 tackles for loss, 3 passes defended, and 4 QB hurries. Mike Morris had 3 tackles, 1 sack, a tackle for loss, and a quarterback hurry. Junior Colson had 13 tackles, 4 of them solo, 1 quarterback hurry. Mike Sanra still, the wide receiver converted to defensive back, at a sack, 2 tackles for loss, and a pass defended. So this Michigan defense, let me tell you something. They impressed me. In the way that the offense disappointed me, the defense for Michigan impressed me, because for most of this game, I was expecting that Michigan's offense would just never stop scoring, which of course is going to make the defense's job that much easier. That didn't happen, though. Michigan's defense was put in an uncomfortable situation. They were given a harsher test than I thought they would be given, in part because of their own offensive flaws. And they passed it. They passed it well. So I was impressed with Michigan's defense, because I think that the offense they face in Maryland is probably going to be the second best offense, or maybe the third best offense they face this whole season. Ohio State obviously being ahead of them. We'll see what Penn State has to offer, but a huge part of me is thinking that Maryland at the end of the day will have the better offense than Penn State. But we'll have to see for that one, of course. We're only 4 games in. It's already a third of the regular season is over, but there's 8 more games left to play before we can, before conference championship week, and then there's an additional game in that conference championship week before the playoffs, and then and only then can we look back and determine who's 1 through 25. So the games sort out themselves, But I think it's safe to say that both teams are in the they're in the upper tier of the Big Ten for sure. I have both in my top 25. I have Michigan in my top 4. I have Maryland in my top 25. And I think that both deserve to be where they are at, honestly. And Maryland, a team that they have a passing offense, certainly, and they showed it too. And they have depth at quarterback too, with Billy Edwards Jr., 5 of 9, 62 yards, a touchdown. Taulia Tagovailoa, he got banged up too, and he still fought through it. 20 of 30, 207 yards, 6.9 yards per pass, a TD, 2 picks. He also had 20 rushing yards on 4 carries for 5 yards per rushing attempt. Taulia Tagovailoa was a trooper, and Maryland's offensive line I think they did well. Maryland on the receiving end, they got 10.8 yards per reception, and again, nearly 4 yards per rush. Roman Hemby leading the team with 48 rushing yards and 16 carries. Maryland has a bright future. Congratulate them, wish them well for the rest of the season. My Michigan Wolverines need to learn, though. They need to call better plays. They need to take more risks. I understand that my team won at the end of the day, but when it was 4th and 2, or I think 3rd and 3, and Michigan trotted out CJ Stokes and ran him, and it's 4th and 2, if Blake Corum needs to be rested, why not run JJ McCarthy or dial up a short pass play that he's athletic enough to complete? Or when it's 4th and 2 and you have the lead and you can shut down Maryland because the defense made adjustments, why not go for it? Take some risk. And maybe that's just me being a fan and not thinking logically, but Michigan was out of rhythm for a lot of the game offensively, and seeing that we're going into a road environment that is Kinnick Stadium, the Rattlesnake Pit, or maybe the Anaconda Pit, because they're 5-1 or something in their last 6 meetings with top 5 opponents. You need to have a great offense, because Iowa's defense is great. They'll capitalize on every little mistake. And watch, because they're facing a top 5 team, their offense do just enough to put the defense in an uncomfortable position. So Michigan's offense, hopefully they learn their lesson pretty quickly in practice. It certainly didn't help that Eric All and Donovan Edwards were hurt, but injuries are just a part of the game. They really are. Michigan's defense has nearly reloaded after last year's departures. That I am confident in. Mozzie Smith is a freak. The amount of times that he just penetrated that Maryland offensive line, which I give high praise to, was great. Trying to get in the backfield always. He had a tackle for loss, 8 total tackles. A lot of those tackles is where he stopped the running back cold at the line of scrimmage. Very impressive job by him. This defense is great. 7 sacks against Colorado State, 3 against Maryland. I don't think they didn't get any against Hawaii, maybe 1 or something against UConn, but this defense, it's doing its job. I'm not complaining. Maryland's offense, I thought, was going to score north of 20, regardless of how many points Michigan's offense scored. And I said that some of those points would be scored in the first half, that they wouldn't just be garbage time points, that some of those points it'd be legitimate scores. And they were. All the scores throughout the entire game were legitimate scores. All of them. And this defense still held Maryland to 27 points. And Blake Corum, he's made his case for the number 1 running back in the Big Ten, in my opinion. Look at his game. J.J. McCarthy struggled at times, and they had no depth at running back, so it's Blake Corum, one-man army. And with Maryland, he had 30 rushing attempts, 243 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns, 8.1 yards per rush. 8.1. And no fumbles. He hasn't fumbled the entire year. So 5'8", 210 pounds. On the year, he has 64 rushing attempts for 478 yards, 9 touchdowns, 7.5 yards per carry. Him and that offensive line and that tight end room make for a deadly run game. And Michigan's run game, make no mistake, they won that game. They absolutely won that game. When the passing offense at times was out of rhythm, especially J.J. McCarthy and his deep passes, Blake Corum more than made up for it with his long, gashing runs. The 4th and 1, which turned into a 33-yard touchdown run, and the 47-yarder, which effectively iced the game. The Wolverines were tested, and now they need to learn and optimize. They need to become more efficient. I would compare this game to last year's Rutgers game. The difference is that this Maryland team is much better, at least for now, than last year's Rutgers team. Because, of course, when Rutgers faced Michigan last year, the thought process was, oh my gosh, Greg Schiano and Rutgers are on their way up. And then they got blown out by Ohio State, blown out by Michigan State, and they finished 5-8 on the year. So this Maryland team could very well do that if they play like they did against SMU with penalties, if they're turnover prone and don't do well. But Michigan here was tested, and they played a close game. They faced adversity. They came out on top, and now they need to learn, optimize, and move forward. They absolutely need to move forward. And J.J. McCarthy, take Charles Woodson's advice and use your legs more, because you are a dual threat quarterback, and use your legs. There were moments where he was standing in the pocket waiting for guys to get open. I think one of them, he got sacked, and I remember it because I see the Maryland defensive end coming out from behind McCarthy, and I'm like, if you're not careful, you're going to cough that ball up. And at that moment, it might have been better for him to just run and try and pick up the first down there. But McCarthy's talented. I think that he's playing much better than Cade would have in this situation. I think that game proved that. He is one of the top Big Ten quarterbacks in both QB rating and passer rating. He's a passer rating right now north of 200. Let's talk about Maryland for a few minutes and then close this out. Maryland solidified themselves as a good, all-around tough team. They hung with Michigan. Unfortunately for them, Michigan didn't make as many mistakes as they did. Michigan only had 1 turnover, and Maryland had 3. The difference mainly in the interception category. Both teams had 1 fumble. The difference was Taulia Tagovailoa threw 2 interceptions. But Maryland only had 1 penalty for 5 yards on a false start. They continued to hang around, and they didn't give up. They did not give up when they were down by 15 points, 34-19. They drove down, Billy Edwards Jr. did, and with 45 seconds remaining, Maryland's offense connected. They got the 2-point conversion, 34-27, and even though the probability of them getting that onside kick and scoring another touchdown is just so small, they had fight in them. You got to give them credit where it's due, especially when they played competitive football for over 3 quarters, and when the game finally got out of hand, they still didn't give up, gave themselves their best opportunity to come back. You have to give them credit there. Taulia Tagovailoa is probable for now. He was injured during that Michigan game, and I think that's a testament to Michigan's defense and how physical it is in general. I really do believe that, honestly, and it stank. It stank seeing him hurt because, as I said in my previous video, I don't like seeing good players, especially any player, but I don't like seeing good players especially get hurt because it stinks and there's a risk that it can be a career-altering injury, and they don't deserve that. Finally, Maryland could realistically go 4-0 in the month of October. Let's talk about that and look at Maryland's schedule. Maryland up next has Michigan State, and they are a 7-point favorite to beat the Spartans in Maryland Stadium. After that, they host Purdue, who's currently 2-2. They would then travel to Indiana. Indiana is 3-1. And then in the final, the second to final week of October, the final week they have a bye, the 22nd they host Northwestern, who is 1-3. They could, I see them right now as it stands going 4-0 or 3-1 in the month of October, which sets them up to already be bowl eligible by the time they travel to play at Camp Randall and face the Wisconsin Badgers. That month of November, though, at Wisconsin, at Penn State, hosting Ohio State, and then ending it off with the annual Rutgers matchup at the end of the year, that's a tough November slate. A slate that I look at right now, and even though I think Maryland's good, I think they're going 1-3 or 2-2 there. And even though Rutgers does not look good at all. We still don't know what Maryland is. There is a chance they could go 0-4 in November, but if they can get some momentum, go 4-0 or 3-1 in the month of October, it'll be great for Maryland football, and it'll give them a shot against Wisconsin, a shot against Penn State, probably not a shot against Ohio State, but we'll see. Only time will tell. Both teams look good. They're some of the better teams in the Big Ten, and both, I think, in my opinion, are top 25 teams nationally. And that right there is where I am going to end this video. Thank you for watching. If you like this channel, if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, so that we can grow this awesome community to 10,000 subscribers and beyond. Comment your thoughts on this game and on your prediction for these two programs down in the comments below. And make sure to like this video and hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I post new content. And if you're listening on Spotify, make sure to follow the channel. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys around. Bye.